There are moments in life that remind us of the power of kindness, even in the most unexpected places. Imagine a typical afternoon at a local diner, where the hum of conversation fills the air, the sizzle of the grill sets the rhythm, and a waitress is working hard to serve her customers with a smile. But little did anyone know, this seemingly ordinary day would turn into a story of selflessness, generosity, and a twist that no one saw coming. It all started with a simple act, an act that would soon ripple through the lives of everyone involved, in a way no one could predict. It began when a seasoned war veteran walked into the diner, his steps slow but deliberate. The lines on his face told stories of battles fought and years lived, but there was something about his quiet demeanor that spoke of dignity and respect. As he took his seat at the counter, the waitress, a young woman in her 20s named Sarah, greeted him with a warm smile. She had seen her fair share of customers come and go, but there was something different about him, something that caught her attention. Maybe it was the way his eyes lingered on the menu, or how he hesitated before ordering, almost as if reliving a distant memory. Sarah, like many others, lived paycheck to paycheck, working tirelessly to make ends meet. She had heard countless stories from the regulars at the diner, but nothing had prepared her for what would unfold that day. The old man, after scanning the menu for a moment, ordered his meal. Sarah took the order, and as she made her way to the kitchen, she noticed how he sat there, alone, with only the soft clink of silverware around him. It was clear he didn't come in for company, but for the comfort of a hot meal and a quiet moment to himself. But here's where the story takes a turn. When the bill arrived, the elderly man didn't have enough to pay. He seemed embarrassed, fumbling with his wallet and muttering apologies to Sarah. She could see the guilt in his eyes, the weight of the years bearing down on him. In a moment of compassion, Sarah did something that would change everything. She quietly paid for the man's meal out of her own pocket. Now, for many of us, this would be a simple, kind gesture, a small act of generosity. But little did Sarah know someone was watching. A man sitting in a booth not too far from the counter had overheard the entire exchange. He had seen the way Sarah handled the situation with grace, how she didn't hesitate to help a stranger in need, and how her kindness seemed to come so naturally. But here's where the twist comes in. This wasn't just any man. No, this man wasn't your average diner regular. He was, in fact, a millionaire. The millionaire, whose name was John, had quietly observed the whole scene unfold before him. He had been coming to the diner for years, but today was different. Something about Sarah's actions struck a chord with him. As someone who had seen the ups and downs of life, who had the means to give away money without a second thought, he admired the waitress's willingness to put someone else's needs above her own. To John, this was not just about a meal or a moment of kindness. It was about character, and he recognized it immediately. When Sarah returned to check on the veteran, John finally stood up and approached her. His presence, commanding yet humble, caught her attention. She hadn't noticed him much earlier, but now, as he stood in front of her, she couldn't help but feel a slight nervousness. He smiled and introduced himself, but Sarah, still thinking he was just another customer, wasn't expecting the conversation to take the turn it did. "Excuse me, miss," he began. "I couldn't help but overhear what happened. What you did for that man was incredibly generous." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't used to being praised for just doing her job, let alone for a simple act of kindness. She tried to brush it off, telling him that she was just doing what anyone else would have done. But John wasn't having it. He knew that acts like the one she had shown were rare, and he had a feeling that Sarah's generosity was just the tip of the iceberg. "You're not just anyone," John said with a knowing look in his eyes. I've been watching you for a while. You don't just serve food. You serve people with heart. And that's something you don't see often these days. For a moment, Sarah stood there, unsure of what to say. She didn't know this man, and yet he was saying things that seemed too good to be true. But before she could respond, he dropped a bombshell that would leave her speechless. "I want to reward you for your kindness," John said. "I believe people like you should be recognized for the good they do. What you did for that man today, it didn't go unnoticed. And I think you deserve something more than just a thank you." The words hung in the air like a cloud, and Sarah could hardly process what was happening. Was this a joke? Was this some kind of prank? She had heard of rich people doing weird things, but this was different. This wasn't about a tip. This wasn't about anything she had ever imagined. John's eyes were serious, and his next words would change everything. "I've got a reward for you," he said, his tone steady. "But first, I need you to hear me out. There's something I want to offer, but it might take you by surprise." Sarah's heart raced, and in that moment, she knew her life was about to change forever. What could this man possibly offer her, and how would she respond? The questions were endless, and Sarah stood frozen in place, unsure of what would come next. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would take her far beyond the walls of the diner and into a world she never thought she'd be a part of. What could this millionaire's reward be, and what impact would it have on Sarah's life? Stay tuned as the story unfolds and discover the unexpected twists and turns that would follow. As Sarah stood there, her heart pounding in her chest, she found herself unsure of what to make of John's offer. She had worked in that diner for nearly 3 years, and in all that time, no one had ever said anything like that to her. She was just a waitress, nothing special, just trying to get by and take care of the bills. Her life hadn't been easy. Her mom had passed away when she was young, and she had been raised by her aunt, who struggled with her own demons. Sarah had learned early on to rely on herself, and the only thing that kept her going was the hope of a better future. Even if it felt out of reach, she didn't expect anything from anyone, and certainly not from a complete stranger. But there, John was, standing before her, with a look in his eyes that suggested he wasn't about to let her walk away without hearing him out. The veteran, still sitting at the counter, had no idea what was unfolding behind him. To him, it was just another meal, another day. But for Sarah, everything was about to change, though she couldn't yet grasp the magnitude of it. John couldn't tell she was confused. He offered a reassuring smile, trying to put her at ease. "I know this must be overwhelming," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "But I'm serious. What you did for that man, it spoke volumes about the kind of person you are. I've spent my whole life in business, but it's people like you who really make the world work. And that's why I want to help you." Sarah shifted nervously on her feet, her mind racing. She glanced over at the veteran again, who seemed oblivious to the conversation that was taking place behind him. Was he even aware that someone was trying to repay her for what seemed like a simple gesture of kindness? It didn't matter to Sarah. To her, the most important thing had always been just helping people when they needed it. She shook her head. "I don't really need anything," she said quietly, her voice betraying the uncertainty she felt. "I'm just doing my job. I'm happy to help." But the truth was, Sarah wasn't happy at all. Life was tough, and she had dreams. She'd dreamed of going to college, of leaving the small town and working in a career she actually enjoyed. But every day she was stuck serving food to customers who never took the time to look at her as anything more than a face behind the counter. And yet, here was John, a stranger, treating her like something more, like she had value. It felt both unfamiliar and exhilarating. John took a step closer, his eyes locking with hers, and for the first time, Sarah felt seen. "I get it," he said, his voice calm. "But I know you want more. You don't have to do this alone. There's no shame in accepting help when you need it. We all need help sometimes." That was the crux of it, wasn't it? She didn't know how to ask for help. She had always been the one to give, to do everything on her own. Asking for help felt like admitting weakness, and Sarah was far too proud for that. But there was something in the way John spoke, something in his eyes that told her he wasn't asking her to rely on him forever. He was offering an opportunity to change her life in a way she had only ever dreamed of. The tension in the air hung heavy as Sarah hesitated, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She knew there were risks in taking up his offer, risks she couldn't even fully understand yet. She was no fool. People didn't offer things like this without expecting something in return, right? Was this a transaction? Or was John just trying to do something good? She wasn't sure, and the uncertainty gnawed at her. Meanwhile, John had been watching her closely, sensing her hesitation. He wasn't just some wealthy businessman trying to make himself feel good by offering handouts. He had seen something in Sarah, a strength, a goodness that was rare in the world he occupied. He had been successful in his career, yes, but he had spent much of his life chasing money, chasing status, and in the end, it had all felt hollow. He had a lot of things, luxuries, comforts, but he had learned that none of those things mattered unless he used them to help others. "I'm not asking for anything in return," he continued, his voice steady, "but I want to see you succeed. I think you're capable of more than you realize." There was a long pause as Sarah looked down at the counter, her fingers lightly brushing the edge of the table. She was stuck in a mental tug-of-war, unsure of what the right thing to do was. It wasn't like she didn't want a way out. The thought of being able to go to college, of getting out of the diner and into something better, was a fantasy she clung to when times were particularly hard. But this felt like too much too fast. She didn't know this man. She didn't know his intentions. John saw the conflict in her eyes, and that's when he decided to lay his cards on the table. "Listen," he said, lowering his voice, just enough to make the conversation feel more personal. "I'm willing to help you get where you want to go. I can offer you a scholarship to a school of your choice, somewhere you can really thrive. But it's up to you if you want to take that step. I'm not going to push you, but I want you to know it's there. I want to give you the opportunity that you deserve." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. A scholarship to a school of her choice. It sounded too good to be true, but she couldn't deny that something in her stirred at the thought. Could this be her chance? Could this be the break she had been waiting for all these years? Yet deep inside, she was still uncertain. She had always done everything on her own. Could she really trust a stranger like John, no matter how well-intentioned he seemed? As she stood there, the veteran finally paid his bill and left, oblivious to the dramatic turn of events that had just unfolded. Sarah's mind was spinning. What did this mean for her? What if she took the opportunity and it didn't work out? What if John had an ulterior motive? The room felt smaller, and the weight of the decision felt heavier by the second. "Think about it," John said, giving her one last glance before he turned to leave the diner. His words echoed in Sarah's mind. "I'm not asking for anything in return." And yet, she couldn't help but wonder, what was he really offering her? As John disappeared into the night, Sarah stood frozen in place, her mind racing. Would she take the risk and embrace the unknown, or would she play it safe and continue living the life she knew? The decision loomed before her, and she couldn't help but feel that whatever choice she made, nothing would ever be the same. The suspense was unbearable. What would she decide? For the rest of the night, Sarah couldn't shake the conversation with John from her mind. Every time she tried to focus on her work, his words echoed in her thoughts, like an invitation to a life she never imagined. She found herself pacing back and forth in the small break room, wondering what she should do. Her shift was nearly over, but the weight of the decision felt heavier than anything she had ever faced. She had always dreamed of a better life. Way out of the diner, but the fear of the unknown was holding her back. Could she really trust this man? Could she trust herself? When her shift ended, Sarah walked outside into the cool evening air, her heart still racing. She needed to clear her head. But as she made her way down the street, she saw something that made her stop in her tracks. There, standing at the corner of the diner, was John. He hadn't left. And he wasn't just standing there idly. He was talking to the veteran from earlier. It seemed strange. Why was he talking to the old man after everything that had just happened? Sarah's curiosity got the better of her, and she cautiously approached. As she got closer, she overheard John's voice, calm and reassuring. "I've arranged something for you," John was saying to the veteran. "It's the least I can do. You deserve more than just a meal." Sarah stood frozen, trying to process what was happening. What was John doing? Why was he helping the veteran too? She hadn't known the man's story, had no idea of the hardships he had endured. But it became clear to her in that moment that John wasn't just about helping people who had potential. He wasn't interested in just rewarding someone for doing something kind. He was about lifting people up, regardless of their past, regardless of their circumstances. The veteran, his eyes wide with disbelief, took a step back. "I don't understand," he muttered, clearly overwhelmed. "Why are you doing this for me?" John smiled, his expression warm and kind. "Because you matter. All of us matter. And sometimes a little kindness goes a long way." Sarah felt a pang in her chest. This wasn't just about a meal or a scholarship. It was about something much bigger. A reminder that, despite everything, we are all connected. That simple acts of kindness have the power to change lives in ways we can't even imagine. As Sarah stood there, watching the interaction unfold, her heart swelled with emotion. In that moment, she realized that her hesitation had been more than just fear. It had been the fear of opening herself up to something greater than what she had allowed herself to believe. John wasn't just giving her an opportunity. He was showing her a new way of seeing the world. A world where people help one another, not for personal gain, but because it's the right thing to do. He had proven that kindness and generosity weren't just about money. They were about human connection. John turned and saw Sarah standing there, quietly watching. He walked over to her with the same steady confidence he had always carried. But now there was something else in his eyes. A quiet understanding, as if he knew exactly what she was feeling. "I think you've already made your decision," John said, his voice filled with sincerity. "But if you're still unsure, just remember this. Whatever you choose, it will be the right choice for you." Sarah nodded, her throat tight as she struggled to find the right words. She was overwhelmed with emotion, but all she could manage was a soft "Thank you." The next morning, Sarah woke up with a sense of clarity she hadn't felt in a long time. She wasn't just working in the diner anymore. She was stepping into something new. It wasn't going to be easy, and there would still be challenges ahead. But the fear she had once felt was replaced with a quiet sense of peace. She had decided to take the opportunity. She had reached out to John, accepted his offer, and applied for the scholarship he had promised. She knew there was no going back now. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't want to. And as for the veteran, John had made sure he had a place to stay and the help he needed, offering him a new, beginning of his own, they both had a chance to turn their lives around, not because of wealth, but because of simple human decency and compassion. In the weeks that followed, Sarah adjusted to her new life, one filled with new experiences, challenges, and opportunities she had never imagined. Her journey wasn't about becoming rich or famous, but about realizing that kindness, whether given or received, was the true currency that could change everything. Her relationship with John remained strong, built on the foundation of respect, understanding, and the shared belief in doing good in the world. The diner still existed in her life, but it was no longer her entire world. She visited when she could, always finding time to help the regulars, the ones who had supported her from the beginning. And sometimes, when the world felt heavy and overwhelming, she remembered the moment in the diner when her life had shifted forever, when a simple act of kindness had opened the door to a new chapter. For Sarah, the most important takeaway was that life wasn't about waiting for someone to change things for you. It was about seeing opportunities, recognizing when help was needed, and knowing that you could always choose to take a step toward a better future. The journey was never easy, but it was always worth it. And in the end, she knew that sometimes, just sometimes, a small act of kindness could change the course of someone's life in ways they could never have imagined. Description: in this inspiring story, a kind waitress goes above and beyond to help an elderly war veteran pay for his meal, showing the true power of compassion and selflessness. Little does she know, a millionaire customer overhears the exchange and is so moved by her act of kindness that he offers her an incredible life-changing opportunity. Follow this heartwarming journey of generosity, unexpected rewards, and the impact that one simple act of kindness can have on someone's life. This touching story will leave you reflecting on the importance of helping others and the unexpected rewards that come from caring for others. Watch until the end to see how Sarah's life is changed forever. Tags: Waitress kindness, old veteran, inspiring story, heartwarming, selfless act, kindness rewards, unexpected life change, millionaire help, kindness and generosity, acts of kindness, touching story, generosity in action, life-changing story, pay it forward, selfless gesture, waitress story, reward for kindness, heartwarming video, giving back, kindness impact, veteran appreciation, community support, generosity story, powerful story, touching kindness, story, kindness pays off, inspirational video,